Hello, and a warm very welcome everyone to our today's webinar on the growing prominence of tyrosine kinase inhibitors and its bioequivalence studies. I am Harshvardhan Shrivastava and I represent Vida Clinical Research, one of the largest independent CRO in India, offering its clients a wide range of comprehensive clinical services ranging from BAB studies, PK studies to patient-based trials, biosimilars, biopharmaceutics, regulatory services, and much more. As a facilitator today, I would like to introduce you to all a couple of points as we begin this session. This session will have a presentation in the beginning, followed by a panel discussion. We'll be running a live Q&A during the webinar, which will be led by our backend team present with us here. So far, all of your questions and queries, we have enabled our Ask a Question feature. It's right there on your screen. So you can drop your questions in there. Now, I would like to introduce you to our presenter for today's discussion, Dr. Ravi Alamchandani. Dr. Ravi is MD Pharmacology Gold Medalist with over 6 years of experience in the field of medical affairs and safety reporting. His experience includes working in various hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and the CROs like Lambda Therapeutic Research and Torrent Pharmaceuticals. He is currently associated with Vida Clinical Research and is leading a team involved in medical monitoring, medical writing, and the pharmacovigilance. So over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Thanks, Harsh, for the introduction. Very good evening to all of you in India and a very good morning to all of you in the West. So, not wasting much of the time, I'll initiate the discussion for the day. So these are grossly the topics that we'll be covering. Gross overviews of TKIs. We'll be covering pazopanib and sunitinib and later on the operational aspects. Now, tyrosine kinase inhibitors. Before we start into the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, let us understand what are tyrosine kinases. Around 1 in every 40 human codes is for a protein kinase, and 50% of these are genes mapped to either a disease loci or to a cancer center. Tyrosine kinase enzymes, they can be categorized into receptor tyrosine kinases, non-receptor tyrosine kinases, and dual specificity kinases that phosphorylate not only tyrosine but also serine and threonine. Receptor tyrosine kinase, as we can understand from the name, they bind to the receptors which are located transmembrane. Few of the examples are vascular endothelial growth factor receptors, platelet-derived growth factor receptors, insulin receptor family, ERB receptor family that includes epidermal growth factor receptors and human epidermal growth factor receptor 2, famous HER2. Non-receptor tyrosine kinases are those that bind to the cytoplasmic proteins. Initially, nine cytoplasmic proteins to which the tyrosine kinases bound were identified. However, later on, some more cytoplasmic proteins to which the TKs were binding were also identified. Dual specificity kinases, as I said, they phosphorylate apart from tyrosine, threonine as well as serine. They have a major role in the mitogen. They have a major involvement in mitogen activated protein pathways. MAP kinase is a very common example of it, and there are other examples for the dual specificity kinases as listed below. Coming to the mechanism of action of TKs, tyrosine kinases, they phosphorylate specific amino acid, usually tyrosine, on the substrate enzymes. This results into alteration in the signal transduction, which results in downstream changes in the cellular biology. As a result of these signals, there is modification in the cell growth, there is migration, there is differentiation, apoptosis, and sometimes even the cell death. you see that they have an important role in the cell multiplication, growth, and death. So activation or inhibition of the protein kinases due to mutations, dysregulations, or overexpression can result in dysregulated signal cascades and can thus result in malignancy or other pathologies. So, with the identification of the importance of the tyrosine kinases, the importance to the inhibition of these enzymes was also laid. And thus came tyrosine kinase inhibitors. These are a group of pharmacological agents that block and prevent the apparent action of the mutated or dysfunctional tyrosine kinases. They disrupt the signal transduction pathways of protein kinases by several modes of inhibition. The first FDA-approved tyrosine kinase inhibitor was imatinib, which was first identified in 2001. And since then, over 50 tyrosine kinases have been approved by the FDA. Based on the various requests that we received for development of molecule, we have decided to cover two important molecules today. The first one is pazopanib. Pazopanib is a tyrosine kinase that is indicated in adults for treatment of advanced renal cell carcinoma and advanced soft tissue sarcoma in patients who have received prior chemotherapy. The dosage for this particular molecule is 800 mg. The available strength in the market is 200 mg. So each patient is to receive 4 tablets of pazopanib once daily without food, that is at least an hour before or 2 hours after the meal. Dose modifications are required for those who have hepatic impairment. Now, renal cell carcinoma. If we see renal cell carcinoma, it's very uncommon malignancy. It accounts for only 3% of the adult cancer. However, of all the kidney tumors, it accounts for 85% of the cancers. This disease commonly occurs in the elderly and presents in the sixth or seventh decade of their life. The incidence is, however, on a rise with a rate of 2% per year. What about India? Even in India, the frequency is rising due to increased life expectancy, rising awareness, better diagnostic facilities, and growing prevalence of risk factors like obesity. This can be seen from a study conducted in Tata Memorial Hospital. The authors found that around 1% of the 1% patient of all the annual patient registrations had renal cancer. Renal cancer was present in 18.6% of the new patients that registered in the urology department. So we can see that the prevalence of renal cell carcinoma in India is not less. Now, how do we identify this? Grossly, usually the first complaint that patient faces is hematuria, and the urine routine micro test shows presence of red blood cells in the urine. Later on, with the diagnostic modalities like sonography, CT scan, MRI scan, the tumor can be localized. The histological type identification of the tumor can be done based on the biopsy. Now, why management of the renal cell carcinoma is difficult? It's because around 30% of the patients at diagnosis have metastatic disease. Moreover, the cancer cells, they are resistant to various anti-cancer drugs. However, the available interventions include cytokine therapy, immunotherapy, chemotherapy, and molecular targeted therapies. With regards to the molecular targeted therapy, one is VEGF inhibitor, bevacizumab, that we are very well aware of. Tyrosine kinase inhibitors such as sorafenib, pazopanib, sunitinib, axitinib, and mTOR inhibitors like sirolimus, temsirolimus, and everolimus. Now, pazopanib study design recommendation by FDA is that a 2-period, 2-treatment fasting study, either crossover or parallel, needs to be performed in the patients who are already stabilized on the drug. The strength to be evaluated is 200 mg. And the patient population to be enrolled is those with advanced renal cell carcinoma who are already receiving this drug and are tolerating a stable dose of 800 mg per day. What about Europe? Europe recommends a two-way crossover study in healthy under Parkinson condition, wherein each period is of 3 days and there is a washout of 10 days between each period. With regards to the patient-based study, the study is usually an open-label, balanced, randomized, two-treatment, two-period, two-sequence, multiple-dose, steady-state crossover B study of test formulation against Votrient in patients with advanced renal cell carcinoma who are tolerating a stable dose regime of pazopanib 800 mg per day under fasting condition. These are the standard inclusion criteria for a pazopanib study. As I said, the patient should have advanced renal cell carcinoma and should be on a stable therapy of pazopanib. These are the common exclusion criteria. The point to be noted is the hepatic insufficiency, as we have already seen that hepatic insufficiency requires dose modifications. Each patient in the study is to receive 800 mg of either test or reference product based on the randomization schedule once daily. Each study period is of 12 days. If you exclude the screening period, the total study duration is 24 days, wherein the end of the study is required to be performed on the 25th day. The patients need to be hospitalized for 3 days in each of the periods, and the total visit schedule per patient is nearly 5. So that's about the pazopanib, and the samples to be taken from each patient are 44 for both the periods. Covering pazopanib, we now start to discuss sunitinib. It's another TKI which is indicated in the treatment of gastrointestinal stromal tumor after disease progression on or intolerance to imatinib, and also recommended in patients with advanced renal cell carcinoma. The dose is 50 mg once daily for 4 weeks in a 6-week cycle. The drug is also indicated for adjuvant treatment of patients who are at high risk of recurrence following nephrectomy. Here, the dose remains the same. However, the number of the cycles that are to be given to the patients are maximum of 9. This drug is also indicated in progressive, well-differentiated pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor in adult patients who have unresectable, locally advanced or metastatic disease. However, the recommended dose here is 37.5 mg orally once daily. Now, we have already covered the epidemiology of renal cell carcinoma. We'll look briefly into the epidemiology of GIST. These are again rare tumors. The estimated incidence per year is 1.5 patients per 1 lakh population. Of all the GI malignancies, GIST comprises 1% of the tumor. However, a study in India showed that the prevalence of GIST in India is rising, and the study found that 2.4% of all the GI malignancies were because of GIST. GIST is common mesenchymal tumor of the GI tract and usually occurs in stomach followed by small intestine. Diagnosis includes routine workup and endoscopic biopsy, and with that, the histological identification of the tumor. Scans need to be performed for thorax as well as abdomen to identify the staging. Coming to the management of GIST, it can be managed surgically and with medical therapies with imatinib, sunitinib, and regorafenib. For a localized resectable disease, the patients are usually taken up for surgery followed by adjuvant imatinib based on the risk stratification. For Localized but borderline resectable tumors, the patients are initially given a neoadjuvant therapy with imatinib. Then based on the response, if there is a partial or a complete, a partial or a stable disease, the patients are taken for surgery. If there is a poor response, the patients are either they are escalated on the dose or they are shifted to sunitinib. Rarely, surgery is taken straight away for these patients when there is a risk of either the major bleeding or GI outflow obstruction. In patients with metastatic disease, the treatment usually is imatinib as a first-line therapy, followed by sunitinib as a second-line. Study design recommended by US FDA is study state two treatment, two period, either parallel or crossover study. In the patients that are stabilized on drug, the strength to be evaluated is 50 mg, and patients who are already taking this medication and are on a stable dose need to be enrolled. On the other hand, as for pazopanib, EMA recommends even for this molecule, EMA recommends a healthy volunteer study. Samples are to be taken for 72 hours, and there is a 28-day washout between the two periods. For a patient-based study, the design is multi-centered, randomized, open-label, multiple-dose, steady-state, two treatment, two period, two sequence called crossover BE study of test against the reference in patients with ARCC or GIST who have progressed or are intolerant to imatinib. These are the standard inclusion criteria. Patients who are already on a stable dose of sunitinib are to be enrolled for the study. These are some of the exclusion criteria for the study. With regard to dosing, each patient is to take either the test or the reference product in the dose of 50 mg once daily based on their randomization schedule. Each period in this case is of 14 days. Excluding the screening period, the total study duration is 28 days, where the end of the study is to be performed on the 29th day. Patients need to be hospitalized again for 3 days in each of the period, and the maximum visit is 6 per patient. The number of samples that are to be taken from the patient are 44 for the entire study duration. So that's about sunitinib. I thank you all for your time. I will request Dr. Ashutosh to take forward the operational aspects of this study.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for nicely covering various topics like category of TKIs, details about pazopanib, sunitinib, US and EMA submission bioequivalence studies, overview of study protocol and the management. So now we'll introduce Dr. Ashutosh Jani, who will be taking the next session. Before moving forward, I would like to give a little introduction about him. Dr. Ashutosh Jani is PhD pharmacology with over 17 years of experience in the field of clinical research. Dr. Ashutosh has experience working in academia, pharmaceutical companies, and the contract research organizations like Claris, Accutest, and Lambda Therapeutic Research. During his tenure, he has managed teams involved in the clinical operations and the business development, and he is having good rich experience in clinical development, project management, contract negotiations, implementation of programs in therapeutic areas like oncology, psychiatry, endocrinology, inflammatory disease, and many more. So over to you, Dr. Ashutosh.
Thank you, Ash, for the introduction. And thank you, Dr. Ravi, for building up the base. I'll take it up from here with respect to the operational challenges. So, as you are aware, for any clinical study, the key success factors would be majority onto the knowledge and experience of the sites. Apart from the experience of the sites, it is always essential to have an effective, experienced team built up onto the project to ensure the success of the project. And prior anticipated risk and mitigation strategies definitely adds on to the success factors with respect to the study. So taking care of all these aspects, which are especially needed for the nuances of the patient-based PK studies, we have an experienced project team led by the project manager who would be accountable for the project delivery, would be ensuring and identifying the mitigation of the risk, ensuring the project status reporting on a regular basis, and ensuring the total timelines of the project are met. The project manager would be a liaison between the sponsor and one point of contact for the sponsor. However, the project manager would be supported with a strong team of CTAs, CRAs, the regulatory expert, as well as the medical team. And not to also to mention the report writing, data management, and biostats team would also be helping the project manager in the deliverables. There'll be a strong management oversight with the help of the vice president as well as the head ClinOps for the execution of these type of studies. We have an experienced project manager, senior project manager with more than 11 years of experience and worked with various pharmaceutical companies like Dr. Reddy's in TAS and CROs like Axis and Lambda Therapeutic Research. Just to give you a fair idea about the flow of the project. So subsequent to the feasibility, we ensure the proper planning and the kickoff of the startup and get the required documents, make the regulatory filings, start off the project, ensure a strong monitoring oversight over the project. Subsequently, the balances of the samples, the report, and the draft CSR. So as I mentioned, the pre-study activities play a vital role in the success of the project. So we start off with setting up the customer expectations with respect to the study and getting the site selection process in place. So the vendor selection, etc., happens in the first month of the pre-study activity. In the next month, with all the work executed, work orders executed, and all the plans for the study would be created. That includes the ECRF creation, getting a final list of defined variables, and negotiation with the sites with respect to the contracts and the submissions across sites for the ethics committee. The next month usually is more focused onto the electronic data capture setup with respect to the data management. The regulatory approvals are coming in place along with the EC approvals, and that's when we start off the kickoff meeting. So as we mentioned previously that the site plays an important role, and we are equipped with GCP trained investigators and clinical research coordinators at the sites. The investigators' interest and experience in conducting similar type of studies like say TKIs would definitely be an advantage when it comes to the selection of the site. We also look into the regulatory history and the recruitment potential for the given indication, may it be GIST or renal cell carcinoma in case of TKIs. Apart from that, the healthcare infrastructures, especially with respect to this PK study about the storage of the PK samples, handling of the PK samples, the available infrastructure and logistics are also taken into consideration when measuring the sites onto the selection scales. So as a homework, we also already have proposed sites available for execution of studies where the investigators have participated in similar studies and have been inspected by regulators like USFDA in the past. They have experience working with indications like GIST and renal cell carcinoma. Another important aspect, especially in case of patient-based PK study, is we need to minimize the errors and minimize the scope of errors in this type of studies. In order to do so, we try to harmonize all the processes across the sites And this is done through having robust plans in place, which are executed across all the sites. The site infrastructure, we equip the sites with the necessary infrastructure of, say, deep freezer, centrifuge based on the study requirements. These equipments they are also calibrated to ensure the IQ, QPQ, and the requisite protocols in place. The training is an essential part of any study, and the site is trained robustly with the help of the team here onto all the nitty-gritties associated with the protocol. Needless to say, the logistic robustness with respect to the sample collection and pickup is also emphasized upon. As I mentioned, we provide calibrated equipments like digital clocks, measuring cylinders, hygrothermometers, and breath alcohols based on the study requirement. So these are one of the key factors where we try to minimize the errors, especially for these type of patient-based PK studies. As I was mentioning, we plan, and planning helps us in execution. So there's a detailed list of various plans which we put up for the study that includes the project management plan, the bioanalysis plan, the PK sample handling plan, the data management plan, edit check plans, risk management plan, safety plans, quality plans, etc., etc. So these help in uniforming all the processes for the study throughout all the sites. Subsequently, we kick off the study with all the stakeholders in place. So there's a kickoff meeting which happens where the quality department, along with the operations, data management, bioanalytical team, the sponsor, and the medical team contribute to this kickoff meeting. There's a detailed introduction. The study protocol is discussed along with the expected timelines, and the requisite platforms trainings are given on them. The bioanalytical and sample handling, which is a key thing, is also taken care during the kickoff meeting to set up the expectations. The relevant regulatory guidelines and rules are also trained. We equip the sites with the requisite SIV kits, which includes the files as well as the consent forms in various languages. There are various other stationary items along with the data logger, digital clock, thermohygrometer, and urine pregnancy kit, which is provided. The sites are initiated subsequently with the help of a trained CRA, and during the SIVs, the project manager also accompanies the sites on need basis. So the execution phase, the SIVs usually consist of 2 days, and the first day is more focused exhaustively onto the protocol and the therapeutic trainings. There's a facility tour which is undertaken to reconfirm based on our site selection protocols, and the monitoring frequencies are discussed, and the study tools are put up with the site team. More emphasis is laid on the IP handling and administration, storage and retention on the day 1. The second day is more focused onto the ECRF completion, the quality resolution training, and the collection and handling of the PK samples, and the relevant regulatory trainings, including the GDP, GCP, are given on the second day. So based on our assumptions and the initial feasibilities, we chart down the recruitment across various sites, and based on the same, we try to put up the projections for the study. The phlebotomist, as I mentioned, are one of the key site persons who would be ensuring the total study deliverables in a safely manner. And we have a team of phlebotomists who are well trained in handling these oncology patient-based PK studies. They are deputed onto the site, and they are part of the site delegation. The recruitment strategies from a patient level are framed up, including motivational visits or motivational boost to the screening activity. The site staff is trained onto the required aspects, especially with respect to retention of the patients, the quality measures required at the site. Coming to monitoring, we do regular monitoring across all the sites. That includes the routine monitoring. Apart from that, there is in-process monitorings where the monitor is present during the first dosing of the patient to ensure that the dosing happens as per the required protocols. Given the current scenario where the travel restrictions are in place and we have the capabilities to ensure remote monitoring because of our platform of RSTV, we are able to take up this activity as well. Apart from that, there is a medical team which supports the study. So there is a medical monitoring activity which is taken up as per the medical monitoring plan. And there are availability of the medical monitor on 24/7 basis for the study requirements. There's review of the lab parameters, which is taken up by the team. And they are also instrumental in the routine weekly conferences for their medical inputs. So post-recruitment, the phase would be more onto the CRF retrieval, the resolution of all the queries associated with the study, the completion of the bioanalysis, and the sharing of the first draft report to the sponsor. Subsequent to the finalization, we initiate the closeout visits. So there is a dedicated quality team which is responsible for the quality compliance across the sites, and they are responsible for ensuring that the study protocol is followed and the study is conducted as per the applicable regulatory requirements. So as a part of that, they conduct routine audits across all the sites. Based on our few learnings, based on our oncology studies, including the renal cell carcinoma studies, which we have done in the past, we do like to lay special emphasis onto the screening of the patient because that would be an integral part of the study inclusion. And especially with respect to delegating of the responsibilities as well as the source document is designed in such a way to ensure minimum errors from a GDP point of view also. Apart from that, ensuring that there are requisite backups available at the site, especially in form of dry ice, to ensure any temperature fluctuation or monitoring. So we lay down various, we identify this risk a prior and ensure a mitigation strategy is in place, like say temperature monitoring of the required IPs and the PK sample collection and handling. So if there is a risk, we definitely ensure that our own trained phlebotomist is available at the site who is responsible for ensuring the collection and handling of the PK samples. The storage, we also equip the sites with the requisite online storage devices like Friga alarms to ensure that there is fluctuation, we get intimated on a timely manner. To reduce the dropout as a risk management, we train the site team to ensure that they enroll only patients who are compliant to the regular visits and not coming out from far off places where it's difficult to reach the given site. Apart from these clinical aspects, we are equipped with the required bioanalytical method. When it comes to prazopanib, we have a validated method for prazopanib and with linearity range of 0.3 to 150 micrograms per ml. So that's developed on our LCMS API 3200. We have the requisite long-term stability, which is essential, especially when we're dealing with patient-based PK studies, because the samples will be stored at the site for a longer duration of the time. We also have established whole blood stability as well as the requisite freeze-thaw cycle stability is estimated. Our method for Prazosinib is robust enough and in compliance with the applicable US FDA, EMA, as well as the Canadian regulatory requirements. Coming to our equipped infrastructure with respect to handling of the various studies, we are equipped with clinical trial management system. So with these platform in place, we are able to control various aspects, especially with respect to the investigators, their payment, their inventory, as well as management of the files, etc. The monitor is equipped with CTMS, and they have access to real time, and the monitoring visits are performed and the reports are made up on the CTMS platform, the access to which is given to our sponsors for real time review of the reports and comments. Apart from that, we also are equipped to handle data management. So we have this electronic data capture system, which is 21 CFR Part 11 compliant. And it's a web-based, cloud-based system, which is having integrated MEDRA as well as WHO. So our dedicated clinical data management team is responsible for setting up of the database as per the required CDISC standards, reviewing of the same, generating the DCF, coding the MEDRA as per the requirement, processing the data. So we have a dedicated team of data managers who take up this responsibility. As we touched base in the initial slides, we have equipped with remote source data verification platform, which is in compliant to HIPAA as well as 21 CFR Part 11. And it's a cloud-based platform with high security measures. So with this remote SDV feature, the site is able to upload the required source data onto our RSDV platform on a secure way. The data is controlled access only to the relevant CRA and deputed on the study. And there are no downloading functions available, and it's all as per the requirement of the regulators. So these are the process flow. There's a collection of the data. They are scanned, they are uploaded, reviewed by the monitor, and the comments are sent across to the site for the execution. Coming on to studies like Prazosinib, why should VIDA be part of your clinical trial for Prazosinib? So VIDA is equipped with an experienced clinical development team, and we do provide deep insight into the protocol as well as strategies for the execution in a very early stage itself. There's direct involvement from the operations teams also into the designing and implementation of these trials. We have a strong network of experienced investigators who have conducted similar studies in the past, and they have been inspected by US FDA for various other studies. Apart from that, we are equipped with our SDV platform, as well as we have a robust bioanalytical method aligned to the regulatory requirements of either US FDA or EMA. Coming on to the advantages with respect to VIDA, we are an independent CRO with robust quality and regulatory compliance records. We typically are a one-stop solution for our clientele, providing all the bouquet of services, right from protocol writing to the final CSR. We have the skilled personnel with focused onto the professional development and highly customized centric certification. Coming on to our regulatory credentials, we have successfully cleared more than 80 regulatory audits till now, and 8 of them in the last 24 months. We have also faced 17 audits for patient-based studies across various clinical trial sites in the past. So that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Afiko, for such an elaborated presentation. So now moving on, we will be proceeding ahead towards our panel discussion round where we are going to answer some of the really interesting questions posed by our audience. So my first question is for Dr. Ravi. is considering that the disease may be treated either by nephrologist or a gastroenterologist or oncophysician or oncosurgeon, which will be the ideal investigator for the study?
Well, Harsh, that is indeed a tricky question. And in this scenario, I believe it can be a mixed pool of the investigators, depending upon the PI's preferable practices. Some nephrologists, they prefer to practice as a, nephro-oncosurgeon, or even the oncosurgeon can be enrolled in the study. So the PI's preferable practice, their database, their experience of the CT and availability of the ethics committee at the site. All these factors can play a role in the selection of the investigator. However, we can take a mix of either of these fields for this particular study. I would say even the latest multi-specialty hospitals, wherein there are multiple doctors collaborating. We can even have one as a PI and the other as a co-I. So that is also a possibility. Thank you.
Dr. Ravi. So my next question is for Dr. Ashutosh. What are the challenges to conduct such studies?
Yeah, Harsh. So definitely PK studies obviously come up with various challenges, including the recruitment, patient identification, selection of the patient, screening them for the required key parameters for the enrollment, and access the validity of these all aspects. So, especially when we're dealing with patient-based bioequivalence studies, these are quite essential. And apart from that, we think that the experienced investigators, which are well versed with the clinical trials, especially patient-based PK trial, which are exhaustive with respect to the blood draws. So getting them on board and ensuring the compliance is definitely a challenge. We are good enough in that manner that we have a requisite pool who are experienced with these type of patient-based PK studies, which are exhaustive with respect to the blood draws. Apart from that, the logistic itself is challenging. So samples, storage, shipment is an integral part of any success associated with the study. We are fortunate to have agreements in place with various logistic and sample shipment companies, and we have successfully executed them, and shipment of IMPs as well as the blood samples. The last but not the least parameter would be the PK sampling, which would be challenging. You understand the samplings to be taken in patients, and that too in oncology patients. So at times their veins are blocked, and it's difficult because of the various chemotherapies or radiations they receive. It's difficult to locate and get the requisite blood draws. So in these cases, we definitely required skilled manpower, and we have our team of phlebotomists who are skilled enough to take up this responsibility, and they have handled these type of complex studies, especially in oncology patients in the past. So with these equipped challenges and the available resources like phlebotomists, we have successfully executed several regulatory studies, and we are definitely quite confident to take up any of such challenging studies and successfully execute the same.
Thank you, Dr. Ashutosh. So again, the next question to you is, what is the status of availability of TKIs in India?
Yeah, so when it comes to TKIs, in India, we have various molecules like imatinib, which is available, prazopanib, which is currently the molecule hot thing in case of TKIs, where we get several inquiries with respect to prazopanib and its study executions. Sunitinib, lapatinib, dasatinib, erlotinib, gefitinib, as well as nilotinib, and sorafenib. So these are a few of the TKIs which are available in India, and the current one of interest for many of our sponsors is usually prazopanib or gefitinib.
Thank you, Dr. Ashutosh. Now, next question is for Dr. Ravi. How common are the advanced renal cell cancers and JITS tumors?
Yeah, so Harsh, as I covered during my presentation, both these tumors are very rare, and so it is very much important to select the right sites, to have sites from those states where the prevalence and the incidence of this disease are on a higher side, as well as to select those PIs who have an experience of using this molecule in the patients, who are commonly aware of the common adverse events that are encountered during this while these drugs are being given. So that's what I would conclude, that these are the rare tumors and it is very difficult to find these patients, and so your site selection is a very key aspect for these particular studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ashutosh and Dr. Ravi, for your active participation in this panel discussion and nicely answering to most of the audience questions. I would like to take a pause over here. We understand this session has kept us all well engaged throughout, but due to time constraint, we would not able to take any further question at this time of point. But please be assured that we'll be sending the answers to each and every question of yours via email. Also, we'll be sending across the recorded link of this webinar on your registered email ID. Lastly, I, on behalf of Vida Clinical Research, would like to sincerely thank you all for being here today and taking out the time to be a part of this webinar. I would also like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Ravi and Dr. Ashutosh for being such a wonderful presenter and giving us all great learnings today. At Vida Clinical Research, sincerely look forward to host you all again. Till then, take care, stay safe everyone, and goodbye. Thank you.